If you had the job of choosing the number one overall pick in this year's NBA draft, who would you pick? But just as important, do you think that you can make the correct choice? Victor Wembanyama, Brandon Miller, Scoot Henderson, Amen Thompson. Are you choosing a player that fills a role on your team, or are you choosing strictly based on the best player in the draft regardless of position? In some years, the decision is pretty clear cut, but in other years, you could be one pick away from making a terrible decision that's going to destroy your franchise for years to come. Basketball is a team sport, and it takes an entire cohesive unit to win an NBA championship. But picking the best player in any given draft class can propel a team in the right direction for the next decade. So who do you choose? Well, this decision is not nearly as easy as one may think, until now. Every once in a while, a franchise will use their number one overall pick on a player that kind of makes you scratch your head. And out of all the non-NBA prospects in the world, you choose him? There's got to be a reason why dozens of scouts, coaches, GMs, and millions of dollars are worth of resources concluded that these players are worthy of the number one overall pick. Now, like myself, you're probably thinking, hey, I guarantee I can make a better pick than this franchise. But hindsight is always 20/20. And it's easy to sit back and say choosing 40 other players ahead of Nikola Jokic was a terrible decision. Out of the 2003 NBA draft, 11 players didn't even play a single NBA game, and only one is still playing now. That's LeBron James, who was actually the best player in the draft. So that means 11 of the most savvy NBA minds in the world picked a player in the draft that never even stepped on the NBA court. That's atrocious. Typically, GMs, they do a decent job as they work their way down the draft board. But there's just something about that first pick in a 7-year stretch between 2005 and 2011. Every single number one pick was not the best player in their draft class. Even though there is more film available to break down and much better scouting techniques, making the right pick today is nearly impossible without using Cerebro Sports metrics. Watching an NBA prospect up close and in person is a crucial part of the process. It's still very early in their careers, but Jason Tatum has asserted himself as the best player in this draft. Of course, making a decision based upon just stats is tough, but even with the advantage of watching the kid play, GMs and scouts across the league, they felt that he was only worthy of the third pick in the draft. Now, if the Sixers had created a free account on Cerebro Sports, they would have picked Tatum instead of Markelle Fultz with the number one overall pick. And it's very possible that they would have made a trip to the finals by now. But making the correct pick is not as easy as it seems. Here are two more prospects. This time, both players are from the same school and the same position. Both of them being one and dones, the team with the second overall pick needs a stretch that can space the floor and get the ball inside. Now, make your pick. So which player do you choose? Well, hopefully it's the prospect number 2, because this player is the catalyst behind every Orlando Magic's win last season. And as we discussed in regards to some picks, it's nearly impossible to predict what kind of player that will become. So if you didn't pick Wendell Carter Jr. in this experiment, you're not alone. At the time, Bagley was the main guy at Duke. And in 2014, if you took Nikola Jokic with a top 10 pick in the draft, you would be laughed at and fired from your job. And in 2014, if you let Jabari Parker slip past the 10th pick, you would also be laughed at and fired from your job. And yet, in hindsight, both of these decisions would have been the correct one. Now, circumstances and developmental curves are also different experiments like this. They're a lot easier to see because with Cerebro Sports, you have the advantage of watching a player's strengths and weaknesses unfold right in front of your eyes. But it gives us the insight as to what GMs and scouts and coaches are using Cerebro Sports for. The NBA draft goes through phases like this in the early 2000s when the NBA went through its high school prospect craze. From the time the NBA was founded in 1949, all the way through the 2000 NBA draft, there were a total of 14 high school players selected in the NBA draft. In the 5 years following the 2000 NBA draft, there were 28 high school players selected in that NBA draft, peaking in 2004 and 2005 with 17 high school players selected in just 2 seasons. Of course, this was the following of the success of LeBron James, and the trend that followed was massive. NBA teams were chasing high school players like Robert Swift and Ricky Sanchez in hopes that they would land the next superstar in the draft. Now, it was getting pretty crazy because only 5 times in NBA history has a player with no college experience gone first overall in the draft. All 5 of these picks came with a 6-year span, but the odds of a team making the right choice in the NBA draft is slim out of tens of thousands of potential prospects. The NBA draft narrows the pool of players down to about 80 guys that have a shot at getting drafted. Out of these 80 players, 60 of them will actually get drafted. Out of the 60 that are drafted, 8 won't even play a single second in the NBA. Of the 52 that do see action in the NBA, only 39 draftees will play at least 1 season in the NBA. We are down to just 39 players, and we've only covered a season's worth of games. Out of these 39 players, about 12 will average 10 points or more throughout their entire career. And of these 12 players, about 5 of them will eventually make at least one All-Star team. But here's the kicker. On average, only 1 in 2 draft classes features a league MVP. In fact, the last 25 years, there has been just as many busts chosen with the number 1 overall pick as league MVPs. So you have the honors of selecting the first overall pick in the NBA draft. You can be as optimistic as you want, but the odds that you'll select the best player in the draft, the player you'll select has about a 75% chance of becoming an All-Star, and about 1 in 5 chance of becoming a league MVP. But he also has the same odds as becoming a bust, and you're in the need of a lengthy point guard to bring a spark back to your franchise. But then again, you have a shot at an NBA-ready 7'1" big man who looks to be the best player in the draft. Regardless of position, your fan base is begging you to go with the general consensus and choose the player who is projected to go first overall. But the 2-year college guy that has proven time after time that he can perform with consistency and efficiency is starting to look like the most reasonable pick. 5 minutes on the clock, and your team is on the board. Make your pick.